Hi, I'm Shelby and I love Shakespeare, like a lot. Today we're going to be breaking down Portia's speech in The Merchant of Venice by William Shakespeare that begins, "The quality of mercy is not strained." In this video, I'm going to be going line by line to explain what Portia's saying, why she's saying it, and where it fits into the context of the play as a whole. And give you some performance tips along the way in case you're preparing this for an audition or a performance. There is a huge trap to avoid in this monologue, so make sure to watch all the way to the end so that you don't make this mistake by falling into this trap. I got you. If you're new to my channel, I'm Shelby Lewis. I'm a professional actress, theater teacher, and audition coach. If you're a budding Shakespeare nerd or just need general Shakespeare help to prepare for a class assignment or an upcoming performance, make sure to click the subscribe button below so you can see everything that Shelby Loves Shakespeare has to offer. Without any further ado, let's begin. Text work for Shakespeare can be extremely involved and complicated, and in my case, utterly addicting. But in the most basic terms, I like to break down my monologue text work into 3 sections. I call them Up to This Point, Vocab and Paraphrase, and the 3 chunks. So let's start by getting you up to this point. Up to this point, I will warn you, a big chunk of the play has already happened. All of Shakespeare's plays have 5 acts, and this speech is in the 4th act. So within the play, The Merchant of Venice, this speech happens at the absolute climax of the play. I will do a super quick recap here of the play as a whole, but for purposes of providing context for this specific monologue, I will mainly focus on what in the plot has directly happened to Portia, the character who's speaking this speech, i.e. the play up to this point from her perspective. Note that the quality of mercy speech is in what we call the courtroom scene. So I'll need to give you ample background on why Portia, this highborn lady, is even in a courtroom, let alone dressed as a dude, why she's talking about mercy, i.e. who she's requesting mercy from, and why it's so important to her. Hint, someone's about to die and she's begging for their life. So stay with me and all shall be revealed. We first meet Portia in Act 1, Scene 2. We, the audience, see that she is very well dressed and in a room that appears quite grand. She is well-to-do, rich, and very beautiful. Portia lives in a kingdom called Belmont, which means beautiful mountain. Very pretty. And though she's not technically royalty, she is of noble birth and an heiress, meaning her dad, who recently died, left her a lot of money. So suitors from all over the globe are coming to try and woo her and get that fortune. However, before he died, her dad set up this little test for all of the boy toys to pass before they can woo his gorgeous, single, wealthy daughter. The hopefuls are presented with 3 boxes to choose from: gold, silver, and lead. And each of them have a little riddle on them that someone has to decipher in order to choose which box might be the one that will win Portia. I do this because inside there's a portrait of her, and that's how you know you got the right box. You won. Like a Sears portrait. But to make this choice is actually a really intense risk, because if they choose wrong, they have to vow to never marry anyone else again in their life. So yeah, gulp. Portia's dad meant well when he set this crazy scheme up, thinking that it would show love and offer her protection after he's gone, but instead, it's making Portia's life miserable. In essence, this mechanism, known as the casket test, strips Portia of any personal agency or independent thought. It doesn't matter who she wants to marry, it only matters who happens to pick the right box. And it's a 1 in 3 chance. It's a lottery rather than love. So, for all intents and purposes, she is a pretty princess who also happens to be extremely intelligent and is locked in a unique tower of this riddle-ridden test that will decide her fate without her having any control over its outcome. So, all that background to say, in this first scene, we see Portia talking with her lady-in-waiting and BFF Nerissa about her circumstances, bemoaning them. Her first line in the play says it all: "By my troth, Nerissa, my little body is aweary of this great world." In other words, she tired. Not only of the long parade of guys who are trying to win her that she has to smile and put up with because of a silly decree, but of the lack of choice or power that women in general had in her current time. Once Portia has her I can't even moment with Nerissa, the girls gab and giggle and roll their eyes about the next batch of suitors. But one of them that Nerissa mentions makes Portia's eyes sparkle a bit. A guy named Bassanio. She's met him once, and she described him as a scholar and a soldier. Smart, strong, hot nerd, super sexy. Bassanio is therefore positioned as the prince in this story that will save her from her proverbial dragon of her not being able to choose whom she marries. But Bassanio is a little more of an Aladdin than a prince. Unlike the other actual princes that are coming to woo Portia, Bassanio doesn't have the money and the title that a suitor of this level should. But he's the good guy and the hero, and luckily, he has rich friends. And so he ends up asking his rich friend and BFF, Antonio, a wealthy merchant, the merchant of Venice. Yeah, right? You see what I did? And yes, we're talking about the Venice, like Venice, Italy, with all the gondolas, pasta. Yes. So Antonio has a thriving trade business involving ships that he owns and desirable goods therein. So he agrees to loan Bassanio the money so that Bassanio can be a worthy contender for Portia's hand. FYI, many Shakespeare scholars, investigators believe that Antonio is in love with Bassanio himself, which explains why he would take such a huge risk to give his friend so much money to make his dreams come true. And that makes it even more sweet because he loves Bassanio, but wants him to be happy with someone else, putting his friend's desires above his own. So in the Aladdin metaphor, I guess that makes Antonio the genie, which means that there's a love triangle between the genie, Aladdin, and Jasmine? That's so funny. Antonio is about to have a huge payoff from one of his ships coming into the harbor. But as of right now, as far as the funds that he has on hand, he doesn't have all the money that Bassanio needs to go to Belmont. And so Antonio reluctantly saunters to this man he hates, a man named Shylock, to get a loan. Why does this matter? I thought we were talking about Portia. This is the whole reason for her speech, because that loan that Antonio is asking Shylock for, that then goes horribly wrong, is what the courtroom scene is all about. And the courtroom scene is where Portia speaks the quality of mercy. And she speaks it to the man that Antonio made this deal with to ask Shylock to beg him to cancel this deal in order to save Antonio's life. So what's this deal? Yeah, what's the deal? What's the deal, man? Shylock, a Jewish man who has been treated like dirt his whole life, especially by Antonio because of religious prejudice and much more, agrees to lend Antonio the money on one condition: that if he can't pay it back, Shylock gets from Antonio 1 pound of flesh. That might sound really poetic, but let me explain. So a pound of flesh, to give you a visual, is this much, right? Like a pound of ground turkey. So can you imagine this being the thing that Shylock wants to take from Antonio? A pound of flesh means he wants Antonio to die. So Shylock asking for 1 pound of flesh is a ballsy move. The payment he's asking for is revenge, ultimate revenge. Now, Portia doesn't know any of this until fast forward through the rest of the play. In Act 2, she says a lot of suitors come through and they fail miserably, blah, 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 and then Bassanio arrives. And in Act 3, they meet each other, they fall head over heels, and she is a nervous wreck when he is doing the casket test. And then he chooses right. Yes. But then they all get the news that Antonio's ship that was supposed to have that extra money that he would pay Shylock back with got shipwrecked, which means that he can't pay his debt on the bargain that they struck. And Shylock has a legal right to kill Antonio by taking his pound of flesh. And Bassanio is terrified for his buddy. And so, of course, Portia is too, because she loves Bassanio and is now going to marry him. After all, Antonio is the reason that Bassanio was able to try for Portia's hand at all. So while Bassanio leaves to go help Antonio, Portia comes up with a scheme of her own. Remember, she's pretty, but she's super smart. Well, she's pretty and she's super smart. No need to say but. Pretty and smart. oft go together. So Portia plots with Nerissa to dress as boys, join the trial, and take over the proceedings to ensure that Antonio has his best chance of keeping his pound of flesh and therefore his life. This scene, this small moment with Portia making this decision is super significant because it is the first time in the play and probably her entire life that she's able to take control of her own situation. So as our fairy tale metaphor gets slightly darker or more twisted, the princess is let out of the tower, being freed by this silly test, and immediately rides off in turn to save the prince, or in this case, the prince's best friend. Which brings us to Act 4, Scene 1, the courtroom scene. We finally got there. And as we come upon the scene, it is not going well. There's a duke presiding over the court, trying to appeal to Shylock to get him to forget this claim he has over Antonio's pound of flesh. And Antonio even offers to pay double what he owes Shylock, but Shylock is having none of it. I want my bond, and he is resolute. As we've mentioned, Shylock is only concerned with getting his revenge, but it's not because he's evil or anything like that. He has lived a life of being scorned and marginalized and hated just because of his beliefs. And now, similar to Portia, this bond might be the first time in his life he feels agency over the people that have just made his whole existence a living hell for years, including Antonio. He's then seeking a greater retribution, and that is why he's not giving it up very easily. When it looks like all hope is lost, the Duke tells the court that he has asked a learned doctor to come and help preside over the case. And suddenly, someone comes in, but it's not the doctor that he was expecting or that he called for. Instead, it's a young doctor of laws come from Rome named Balthazar that has been sent in the doctor's place. This is in fact Portia disguised as a man in lawyer's robes. And Nerissa is right next to her, also dressed as a man, pretending to be a lawyer's clerk. Textual note, depending on different editions, Balthazar is spelled two different ways. I assume that means an inconsistency in the original text, but I have the original text, not like the one from history, but a facsimile of the folio. So I checked that out to see what it says. So the first time we see the name Balthazar, it's got a little F, but back then in old archaic printy times, that actually meant an S. And then immediately the next time the name is said, as in an entrance, it's Balthazar with a Z. So take your pick, both are right, but always fun to have an excuse to look at the folio. So as soon as Balthazar sits down and takes his place in the courtroom, Portia, as Balthazar, quickly recaps the arguments from each side and then says, "Then must the Jew be merciful. Then must the Jew be merciful." Woo! Which outrages Shylock, who says, "On what compulsion must I? Tell me that." And that's what leads Portia to say her famous, gorgeous, very urgent speech, "The Quality of Mercy."
Yes, you're amazing.
You did it. It was a lot. That's what happens when the speeches are kind of in the end of the play. A lot to recap, but you have gotten up to this point. I'm so proud of you. If you're finding value in this video so far, help others find this video by clicking the thumbs up below. Aw, thanks. And now we come to the speech at hand. The quality of mercy is not strained.